Hollywood has always sold the dream: fame, glamour, power. But beneath the shining lights lies a world built on silence, fear, and untouchable privilege. For decades, some of the industry's most celebrated actors used their influence not just to shape art, but to control, manipulate, and destroy lives. Allegations of abuse, coercion, and exploitation have torn down the myth of the perfect star, forcing the world to ask, how deep does this sickness run? Who among the icons we once worshipped were actually predators hiding in plain sight? And when Hollywood finally decided to expose them, was it justice or just damage control? 15. Kevin Spacey. Once celebrated as one of Hollywood's greatest actors, Kevin Spacey built a reputation on transformation, the kind of performer who could vanish completely inside a character. From the calculating charm of House of Cards to his Oscar-winning roles, Spacey seemed untouchable, a master of his craft and a favorite among critics and fans alike. But behind that brilliance, according to multiple accusers, was a disturbing pattern of abuse and manipulation that stretched across decades. In 2017, the first allegations surfaced, and the fallout was instantaneous. Anthony Rapp, then an actor who had been a teenager at the time of the alleged incident, accused Spacey of making sexual advances toward him. More voices soon followed, describing similar encounters that took place in private gatherings, backstage corridors, and during film productions. The accusations painted a picture not just of misconduct, but of systemic power abuse. A man whose fame shielded him from consequences for years. Netflix immediately cut ties with him, halting production of House of Cards and rewriting the series to erase his character completely. His upcoming films were canceled or re-edited to remove his scenes. In a matter of weeks, one of Hollywood's most bankable stars became a pariah. Spacey denied the accusations, claiming many were false or politically motivated, but the damage was already irreversible. Court battles followed across both the US and the UK, and while some charges were dropped or ended in acquittals, the shadow of suspicion never left. Hollywood turned its back. Directors who once praised his genius refused to speak his name. Former co-stars distanced themselves, and his once commanding presence on screen vanished overnight. The scandal also became a defining moment in the Me Too era, symbolizing the reckoning of power in entertainment. Spacey's story wasn't just about one man's fall, it was about the collapse of an entire culture that allowed silence to protect fame. Today, even as he tries to return with small independent projects, the industry remains unmoved. Kevin Spacey's legacy now stands as a cautionary tale of how brilliance and darkness can exist within the same person, and how, in Hollywood, exposure can be a fate worse than failure. 14. Armie Hammer. For a moment, Armie Hammer seemed destined for superstardom. With his classic looks, wealthy lineage, and breakout performances in The Social Network and Call Me by Your Name, Hollywood was ready to crown him the next great leading man. He came from privilege, charisma, and charm, the kind of actor who looked born for the spotlight. But in early 2021, that image shattered when a series of shocking allegations surfaced, exposing a dark and disturbing side to his private life. It began with leaked messages allegedly sent by Hammer to multiple women, filled with violent sexual fantasies, domination, and even disturbing references to cannibalism. The internet erupted overnight. What started as online gossip quickly spiraled into an avalanche of accusations. Women came forward claiming emotional manipulation, coercion, and abuse. Screenshots flooded social media, painting a picture of a man whose charm masked predatory impulses. Hammer called the messages vicious and spurious online attacks, insisting that all interactions had been consensual. But the court of public opinion had already decided otherwise. Within weeks, Hammer's career collapsed. He was dropped by his talent agency, removed from major projects like Shotgun Wedding and The Offer, and publicly condemned across Hollywood. The actor who had once been invited to elite film festivals now found himself trending for all the wrong reasons. Even his family's name, long associated with wealth and prestige, became part of the story, with documentaries exploring the Hammer dynasty's troubled history of power and excess. In 2023, the Los Angeles District Attorney's Office announced it would not pursue criminal charges due to insufficient evidence, but by then, his reputation was in ruins. The scandal didn't just destroy his career, it raised uncomfortable questions about consent, celebrity, and the dark side of inherited privilege. Today, Hammer lives quietly, away from the red carpets and magazine covers that once defined him. His attempt to rebuild his image through interviews and reflections has met with skepticism. For many, his story remains one of Hollywood's most bizarre and unsettling downfalls. A man who once had everything, undone not by a single scandal, but by the terrifying intimacy of his own words. 13. Danny Masterson. Danny Masterson was once the easygoing face of early 2000s television. As Stephen Hyde on That 70s Show, he embodied the rebellious cool of a generation, a laid-back actor with a loyal fan base and a promising future. But the persona that made him beloved on screen hid something much darker. Over the years, rumors circulated quietly about his treatment of women, whispered within Hollywood's tight circles. Then, in the wake of the Me Too movement, those whispers became headlines. In 2017, several women came forward accusing Masterson of sexual assault, with allegations dating back to the late 90s and early 2000s. The claims were detailed, disturbing, and eerily consistent. What made the case even more explosive was the involvement of the Church of Scientology, of which Masterson was a devoted member. The women alleged that the church tried to silence them, discouraging reports to police and using intimidation tactics to protect one of its own. Netflix, which had cast him in The Ranch, swiftly cut him from the series, and his agency followed suit. For a time, Masterson stayed silent, denying all accusations and insisting that his encounters were consensual. But as investigations deepened, the case refused to fade. In 2023, after years of legal battles, he was found guilty on 2 counts of rape and sentenced to 30 years to life in prison, one of the harshest sentences given to a television star of his generation. The verdict shocked Hollywood. Castmates from That 70s Show, including Ashton Kutcher and Mila Kunis, faced backlash for writing letters in his defense, a move that ignited public anger and renewed discussions about celebrity privilege. The case became a mirror for an industry still struggling to separate fame from accountability. Today, Danny Masterson's name stands as a grim reminder that even those who seem harmless can harbor monstrous behavior behind the mask of charm. His fall from sitcom favorite to convicted predator reflects a cultural reckoning that no amount of laughter, wealth, or faith could protect him from. Hollywood, once his playground, has erased him completely, leaving only a cautionary tale of power, silence, and the cost of justice delayed. 12. Bill Cosby. For decades, Bill Cosby was the embodiment of family entertainment, America's dad, the warm, funny, and trustworthy face of The Cosby Show. To millions, he wasn't just a comedian or actor, he was a moral icon, teaching values through laughter. But behind that image, prosecutors and dozens of women would later allege a chilling double life. The man once celebrated for clean humor and family values became one of the most notorious figures in entertainment history. The accusations began to surface publicly in the early 2000s, but exploded in 2014, when comedian Hannibal Buress called Cosby a rapist during a stand-up routine that went viral. From that moment, a tidal wave of allegations poured in. More than 60 women came forward, describing eerily similar experiences, being drugged, losing consciousness, and waking up to find themselves assaulted. Many of the alleged incidents dated back to the 70s and 80s, hidden under the weight of Cosby's fame and power. In 2018, after years of legal battles, Bill Cosby was convicted of aggravated, indecent assault and sentenced to prison. The courtroom scenes were surreal, the once beloved father figure now portrayed as a serial predator. Victims spoke of trauma buried for decades, while Hollywood watched in disbelief as one of its most iconic stars was led away in handcuffs. Cosby's fall was complete, stripped of awards, expelled from the Academy, and erased from the cultural memory he once dominated. Yet, in 2021, his conviction was overturned on a technicality, citing violations of due process. Cosby was released, but the public's verdict didn't change. His freedom didn't restore his reputation, it only deepened the debate over whether justice had truly been served. Today, Bill Cosby lives in near isolation, insisting on his innocence and occasionally hinting at a comeback. But his name has become synonymous with betrayal, a reminder that even the most beloved figures can hide the darkest secrets. For Hollywood, his story was more than scandal. It was a breaking point, a moment when the curtain fell and the truth long whispered finally took center stage. 11. Harvey Weinstein. Few names in modern Hollywood carry as much infamy as Harvey Weinstein. For decades, he wasn't just a producer, he was the gatekeeper of power. The man behind Miramax and the Weinstein Company shaped cinema, launched the careers of countless stars, and ruled the awards circuit with an iron fist. To work with Weinstein was to win. But in 2017, his empire collapsed overnight, when dozens of women came forward accusing him of sexual harassment, assault, and rape. The stories were harrowing, but the pattern was unmistakable: power, coercion, silence. The allegations revealed an ecosystem built on fear. Actresses, assistants, and models described meetings that began with professional promises and ended in nightmare scenarios: hotel rooms, locked doors, threats to careers. For years, Hollywood had whispered about Weinstein's behavior, but no one dared to confront him publicly. It wasn't just about one man's predation. It was about an entire system that enabled it. When the New York Times and the New Yorker published their explosive exposés, the floodgates opened. Weinstein denied the accusations, claiming every encounter was consensual, but the momentum was unstoppable. The Me Too movement was born, a cultural reckoning that changed Hollywood forever. Within months, Weinstein was expelled from the Academy, stripped of honors, and abandoned by the very stars who once thanked him in their Oscar speeches. In 2020, a New York jury found him guilty of sexual assault and rape, sentencing him to 23 years in prison. In 2023, a Los Angeles court added another 16 years for similar crimes. The man who once towered over Hollywood's elite now spends his life behind bars, appealing convictions but powerless for the first time. Harvey Weinstein's downfall wasn't just the end of a career, it was the collapse of an era. He became the face of unchecked power, of what happens when silence is bought and fear is currency. His conviction sent shockwaves across industries, empowering survivors and exposing the rot beneath Hollywood's golden image. Once hailed as the architect of modern cinema, Weinstein is now remembered as the monster who built it on broken lives. 10. Steven Seagal. For years, Steven Seagal was the epitome of macho action cinema, a martial arts master turned movie star, whose calm intensity made him a unique figure in the late 80s and 90s. He built a reputation as a tough guy, both on and off screen, portraying heroes who always stood for justice. But behind the sunglasses and stoic stare, dozens of women would later accuse him of the very thing his characters fought against: abuse, coercion, and predatory behavior cloaked in celebrity power. The first cracks in Seagal's image appeared in the early 2000s when several actresses accused him of sexual harassment during auditions and film shoots. Allegations described private casting sessions that turned inappropriate, and incidents where women claimed they were trapped or pressured into uncomfortable situations. Over the years, names like Jenny McCarthy, Portia de Rossi, and Juliana Margulies shared eerily similar stories, tales of manipulation, intimidation, and the fear of career retaliation. In 2018, the Los Angeles District Attorney's Office reviewed 2 new sexual assault cases against Seagal, but both were dropped due to the statute of limitations. He denied all accusations, calling them lies from people seeking attention. Yet as more accounts surfaced, his reputation deteriorated beyond repair. Productions stopped calling. His once lucrative Hollywood career faded, replaced by a bizarre reinvention as a Russian citizen, personal friend of Vladimir Putin, and self-styled political figure. Seagal's life today is a strange reflection of his contradictions, part action hero, part fugitive from reputation. While he has never been convicted of any crime, the volume and consistency of accusations have left a permanent mark. Once praised for discipline and honor, he is now remembered more for controversy than for craft. His story speaks to the uncomfortable truth that fame can insulate men from accountability, allowing myths of strength and virtue to mask darker realities. Steven Seagal's fall wasn't sudden. It was a slow unraveling, a portrait of a man who used the illusion of power to escape consequences until the world finally stopped looking away. 9. James Franco. James Franco was once Hollywood's golden boy, the charismatic, unpredictable artist who could do it all. Actor, director, poet, teacher, even performance provocateur, Franco built a brand on brilliance and rebellion. He was the kind of star critics loved to call fearless, but as the years went by, that fearless image began to look like something darker. Behind the eccentric genius façade, former students and collaborators accused Franco of using his influence to exploit young women under the guise of mentorship and art. The accusations began to emerge publicly in 2018, when several women came forward after Franco won a Golden Globe for The Disaster Artist. They alleged that at his now-defunct acting school, Studio 4, Franco pressured students into performing sexually explicit scenes and created a culture of coercion masked as method acting. Some described uncomfortable power dynamics, claiming he blurred the line between education and personal gratification. Franco denied the allegations, calling them inaccurate, but the damage spread quickly. Former colleagues distanced themselves, his production deals evaporated, and he was effectively erased from Hollywood's A-list. In 2021, he settled a lawsuit filed by two former students for over $2 million, though he continued to deny wrongdoing, admitting only that he had been addicted to sex and had crossed personal boundaries. The case became a reflection of how power could hide behind creativity, how the promise of opportunity could become a trap. Franco's downfall also reignited debates about artistic abuse, the way some actors use their status as boundary, pushing artists to justify unethical behavior. Today, James Franco lives mostly out of the spotlight, teaching privately and working on small, independent projects abroad. Some fans believe in his redemption. Others see him as another product of Hollywood's predatory system disguised as art. Once seen as a boundary-breaking talent, Franco's story now stands as a warning. When fame and authority go unchecked, art can become the perfect cover for exploitation. 8. Marilyn Manson. For years, Marilyn Manson, born Brian Warner, was one of the most provocative figures in entertainment. He thrived on controversy, blending shock rock with theatrical rebellion, cultivating an image that blurred the line between art and horror. But in 2021, that carefully constructed persona collided with reality when several women, including actress Evan Rachel Wood, publicly accused him of sexual, emotional, and physical abuse. What began as whispers about his dark lifestyle turned into a full-blown scandal that dismantled his career and reputation. The allegations were chilling. Evan Rachel Wood claimed that Manson groomed her as a teenager, subjected her to years of manipulation, and used his fame to control her psychologically. Other women shared similar stories detailing isolation, degradation, and violence disguised as love. The pattern was disturbingly consistent. A man who built his art on shock allegedly lived that darkness offstage. Manson denied all accusations, calling them horrible distortions of reality and insisting every relationship was consensual. Yet the consequences were swift. His label, Loma Vista Recordings, dropped him within days. His talent agency ended their partnership, and scenes featuring him in television shows were edited out. The Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department launched an investigation, and multiple lawsuits followed. As the legal battles unfolded, Manson's influence in music and film evaporated. For a man who had once defined rebellion, his silence spoke volumes. His defenders argued that he was being punished for his persona, not his actions, while critics saw his downfall as long overdue accountability. The conversation around Manson became bigger than one artist. It became about the intersection of celebrity, abuse, and the dangerous myth of the tortured genius. Today, Marilyn Manson remains largely absent from public life, appearing occasionally in court or cryptic social media posts. Whether he ever returns to art or not, his legacy is permanently divided between the icon who challenged censorship and the man accused of inflicting real horror behind closed doors. In the end, his story reveals how easily performance can become a mask, one that eventually consumes its wearer. 7. Ezra Miller. Ezra Miller was once seen as the future of Hollywood, a rising star with striking talent, gender-fluid charisma, and roles that blended rebellion with sensitivity. From the perks of being a wallflower to Fantastic Beasts and The Flash, they seemed untouchable, the symbol of a new kind of fame, bold, eccentric, and unapologetically different. But over the past few years, that image has imploded under a storm of disturbing headlines, painting a portrait of chaos, violence, and alleged predatory behavior that even Warner Brothers couldn't ignore. It began in 2020, with viral footage showing Miller choking a fan outside a bar in Iceland. The clip was dismissed at first as a misunderstanding, but what followed made it impossible to look away. In the following years, Miller faced multiple arrests and accusations: disorderly conduct, assault, burglary, and most alarmingly, grooming and manipulating young fans. Parents of activist Tokata Iron Eyes accused Miller of using fame and influence to control their child, introducing them to drugs and isolating them from family. Miller denied all accusations, claiming to be the victim of a coordinated smear campaign. 1. The incidents multiplied: bar fights, restraining orders, cult-like behavior in Vermont, and police reports describing erratic, menacing outbursts. Hollywood executives were left scrambling to save a billion-dollar franchise anchored by an actor seemingly in freefall. While Miller eventually issued a public apology in 2022, citing mental health struggles and a desire to seek treatment, the damage was irreversible. Warner Brothers proceeded with The Flash's release in 2023, but the premiere was overshadowed by controversy. Once celebrated as a generational talent, Miller became a case study in how fame, instability, and impunity can spiral into self-destruction. The public debate shifted from curiosity to disbelief. How had Hollywood protected someone whose behavior had become a global spectacle? Today, Ezra Miller remains largely withdrawn from public life, occasionally resurfacing through legal statements but avoiding interviews. Their story is one of tragic irony, a performer once praised for breaking boundaries now defined by them. In a culture that mistakes chaos for authenticity, Miller's downfall stands as a haunting reminder: even the most promising stars can burn out under the weight of their own darkness. 6. R. Kelly. For decades, R. Kelly was a towering figure in music and entertainment, the self-proclaimed king of R&B, whose songs defined an era and whose collaborations filled stadiums. Behind his smooth voice and seductive lyrics, however, investigators and survivors later alleged a far darker reality. What began as rumors in the 90s evolved into one of the most disturbing scandals in the history of entertainment, a web of manipulation, sexual abuse, and human trafficking that destroyed dozens of lives and ultimately ended his career. Whispers of Kelly's misconduct first surfaced when journalists uncovered lawsuits accusing him of sexual contact with underage girls. In 2002, a videotape allegedly showing Kelly engaging in acts with a minor became public, but he was acquitted 6 years later. Many believed his fame and wealth had insulated him. But in the following decade, more women spoke out, describing a system of control that resembled a cult where young women were allegedly recruited, isolated, and subjected to psychological and physical abuse. In 2019, the surviving R. Kelly documentary aired, shattering public denial and forcing the entertainment world to confront what it had ignored for years. The graphic testimonies of survivors sparked outrage and reignited legal action. Soon after, federal prosecutors charged Kelly with racketeering, sexual exploitation of minors, and human trafficking across multiple states. The evidence, texts, videos, and witness statements painted a horrific picture of power used as a weapon. In 2021, R. Kelly was convicted in New York and later sentenced to 30 years in prison. A second conviction in Chicago added another 20 years to his sentence. His music was pulled from playlists, his label severed ties, and former collaborators publicly condemned him. The man who once wrote love ballads that topped charts was now behind bars, his legacy permanently tainted. Today, R. Kelly's story stands as one of the most devastating falls from grace in entertainment history, not just because of the crimes, but because of how long the industry looked away. For years, fame acted as a shield. But when the truth finally caught up, it revealed what had been hiding in plain sight, the darkness that thrives when power silences pain. 5. Jared Leto. For years, Jared Leto has been one of Hollywood's most enigmatic figures, a chameleon actor, rock star, and Oscar winner whose allure thrives on mystery. Known for his extreme method acting and cult-like presence as the frontman of 30 Seconds to Mars, Leto built an image of artistic genius balanced somewhere between brilliance and obsession. But beneath that mystique, multiple accounts from fans and industry insiders have painted a troubling picture, one that blurs the line between charisma and manipulation. Accusations against Leto began circulating quietly in the mid-2010s, long before the world took them seriously. Several women, some of whom claimed to be underage at the time, accused him of predatory behavior, alleging inappropriate messages, invitations to concerts that led to private encounters, and a pattern of targeting young female fans. On social media and fan forums, dozens of similar accounts emerged, each echoing the same themes: power imbalance, manipulation, and silence. Though no formal charges have ever been filed, the consistency of these stories has kept the controversy alive for years. Leto has never publicly addressed the allegations directly, often choosing to ignore them entirely. His defenders point to the lack of legal proof. His critics argue that the pattern of claims is too persistent to dismiss. As the stories spread, the unsettling dynamic between Leto and his fandom came under scrutiny. Fans began calling his band's following a cult, not metaphorically, but literally. Reports surfaced describing ritual-like gatherings, strict codes of loyalty, and Leto positioning himself as a kind of spiritual leader. For some, it blurred into something darker. The power of a celebrity turned into control. Despite the growing unease, Hollywood hasn't completely turned its back. Leto continues to headline blockbuster projects like Morbius and high-fashion campaigns, his career remarkably intact compared to others facing similar allegations. Critics argue this reflects a double standard, that his eccentric persona and artistic mystique allow him to escape the accountability others could not. Today, Jared Leto remains an unsettling paradox. Adored by millions, accused by many, condemned by few. Whether his actions stem from ego, exploitation, or misunderstanding, his story reveals how easily the lines between art, power, and obsession can blur in the celebrity world. The more he tries to live as an untouchable icon, the more the shadows around him seem impossible to ignore. 4. Shia LaBeouf. Shia LaBeouf's rise in Hollywood was meteoric, from a child actor on the Disney Channel to one of the biggest stars of the 2000s, leading blockbuster franchises like Transformers and collaborating with legendary directors. He was the rebel, the misfit genius who seemed to live for art. But over time, that rebellious image began to unravel. What once looked like creative chaos turned into something far more disturbing: a pattern of violence, manipulation, and alleged abuse that shattered his career and reputation. In late 2020, singer and actress FKA Twigs filed a lawsuit against LaBeouf, accusing him of sexual battery, assault, and emotional abuse. The lawsuit detailed a harrowing relationship marked by fear, control, and psychological torment. According to her account, LaBeouf demanded total obedience, isolated her from friends, and engaged in reckless behavior that left her terrified. Other women, including stylist Caroline Faux, later echoed similar experiences, describing him as both charming and cruel, a man who weaponized his trauma to justify cruelty. LaBeouf's response was complex. He didn't deny everything. Instead, he admitted to hurting those closest to me, citing alcoholism and untreated mental health issues. In a 2022 interview, he confessed to being an abuser, calling it part of a process of reckoning and spiritual repair. But many saw the confession as too late, a public attempt to rebuild after years of destruction. Professionally, the fallout was swift. Netflix removed his name from Oscar campaigns, major studios distanced themselves, and directors quietly replaced him in ongoing projects. What had once been celebrated as artistic unpredictability now looked like danger, a man consumed by rage and self-destruction. Since then, LaBeouf has sought redemption through religion and recovery programs, reportedly converting to Catholicism while preparing for his role in Padre Pio. He speaks openly about guilt and forgiveness, but for many, the damage is beyond repair. His story reflects a painful truth about Hollywood's tolerance for tortured artists. For years, his volatility was marketed as brilliance until it crossed into brutality. Today, Shia LaBeouf stands at a crossroads between repentance and rejection. Whether his contrition is genuine or performative remains debated. But one thing is certain: his legacy will forever be defined not by the roles he played, but by the pain left behind once the cameras stopped rolling. 3. Andy Dick. Andy Dick was once the kind of comedian who seemed untouchable, outrageous, unpredictable, and always willing to push boundaries. His wild behavior made him both a comic legend and a liability, but in the early 2000s, audiences still saw him as Hollywood's eccentric clown. Over time, though, that reputation twisted into something much darker. What began as tabloid gossip about drunken antics slowly evolved into a decades-long pattern of arrests, assault charges, and sexual misconduct allegations that turned Andy Dick from a cult figure into a cautionary tale. The first serious accusations appeared in the early 2000s, when several co-stars and crew members accused him of groping and inappropriate behavior on set. The incidents kept coming: unwanted kisses during interviews, indecent exposure at parties, and multiple allegations of assault. Each time, Dick issued an apology or blamed addiction, promising to change, only to relapse into more chaos. He was fired from films, banned from nightclubs, and even removed from reality shows because of his behavior. In 2018, a colleague accused him of sexual assault during a film shoot, leading to an arrest and eventual charges of groping. The following years brought even more trouble: public intoxication, battery charges, and disturbing online behavior that further eroded what little credibility he had left. By 2022, he was arrested multiple times in California, facing accusations that included sexual battery and domestic violence. Unlike many accused celebrities, Dick never denied his misconduct outright. He often admitted wrongdoing but deflected it through humor or self-pity. In interviews, he oscillated between apologies and denial, claiming he was misunderstood, while court records painted a consistent picture of erratic and predatory behavior. Today, Andy Dick's name is synonymous not with comedy, but with collapse. Once a talented performer with a gift for satire, he has become a tragic example of how addiction, fame, and lack of accountability can destroy a person from the inside out. Once loved for his chaos, he is now shunned for it. His downfall is not a story of sudden scandal, but of years of ignored warning signs, a slow-motion disaster that Hollywood chose to laugh at until it could no longer pretend it was funny. 2. T. J. Miller. T.J. Miller was once one of Hollywood's fastest-rising comedic talents, the loud, unpredictable star of Silicon Valley and scene-stealing sidekick in Deadpool. His offbeat humor, improvisational energy, and refusal to follow the rules made him a fan favorite. But behind the laughter and wild interviews, a much darker side began to emerge. Allegations of violence, harassment, and abusive behavior that ultimately derailed his career and left his public image in ruins. The first major controversy surfaced in 2017 when a woman accused Miller of sexual assault and physical violence during their time in college. The story, detailed in the Daily Beast, described a disturbing encounter that included choking, hitting, and coercion. Miller denied the allegations, calling them false and offensive, but the accusations opened a floodgate of scrutiny. Former colleagues began speaking out about his volatility, describing him as cruel, manipulative, and prone to explosive outbursts on set. As the Me Too movement gained momentum, Miller became one of the first comedians publicly linked to allegations of abuse. Not long after, he was accused of harassing a trans film critic online, and later arrested for calling in a fake bomb threat on an Amtrak train. An incident prosecutors said stemmed from intoxication and erratic behavior. Though the charges were eventually dropped, the damage was already done. HBO cut ties with him, removing him from Silicon Valley, and major studios quietly distanced themselves. His once promising stand-up career dwindled, and film roles disappeared. What had been brushed off as eccentricity now looked like a long history of cruelty disguised as comedy. In the years since, Miller has attempted to stage a comeback, touring smaller comedy venues and framing his downfall as a misunderstanding. He continues to deny all allegations, insisting he was targeted during a time of social hysteria, but for many in the industry, his return has been met with silence. The name that once sold laughter now evokes discomfort. T.J. Miller's story isn't just about misconduct, it's about the toxic myth of the brilliant jerk, the belief that talent excuses harm. Hollywood once applauded his chaos. Now it's the reason he's been exiled. His fall serves as a reminder that the line between comedy and cruelty isn't just thin, it's one he crossed too many times to come back. 1. Mel Gibson. Few actors in modern Hollywood history have experienced a fall as public or as self-inflicted as Mel Gibson's. For years, he was one of the most powerful men in entertainment, the leading man of Lethal Weapon, the visionary behind Braveheart, and the Oscar-winning director who could do no wrong. But behind the charisma and faith-driven image was a man battling deep rage, addiction, and a pattern of violent, abusive behavior that would ultimately expose him as one of the industry's most controversial figures. Gibson's first major scandal erupted in 2006 when he was arrested for drunk driving and launched into an anti-Semitic tirade at police officers. The incident shocked fans, but was later dismissed by some as a drunken mistake. Yet more disturbing revelations followed. In 2010, recordings surfaced of Gibson verbally abusing his then-girlfriend Oksana Grigorieva, a series of explosive, hate-filled rants that included racial slurs, threats, and admissions of physical violence. The world listened in disbelief as the man once hailed for his discipline and faith revealed a side few could have imagined. Gibson denied the worst of the allegations, claiming the tapes were edited and taken out of context, but his career imploded almost overnight. Studios distanced themselves, agents dropped him, and longtime collaborators refused to work with him. For nearly a decade, he was one of Hollywood's most toxic figures, publicly shunned but privately fighting to reclaim his image through apology tours and low-profile projects. He eventually found a path back to filmmaking, directing Hacksaw Ridge in 2016, a critical and commercial success that reignited awards attention. But even as Gibson stood on red carpets again, many questioned whether redemption was truly deserved. The allegations of domestic abuse and bigotry still hang over his legacy, resurfacing every time he returns to the public eye. Mel Gibson's story is a paradox, a man capable of extraordinary art and devastating cruelty. His downfall wasn't born of a single scandal, but of years of unchecked power and rage colliding with accountability. He remains a reminder that talent cannot erase toxicity, and forgiveness in Hollywood is often granted to those the audience can't quite stop watching. For some, he is the definition of redemption. For others, he is proof that predators can survive fame's reckoning if they're famous enough. Hollywood has always known how to hide its shadows, dressing up power as glamour, turning silence into protection. But each of these stories proves that no spotlight can blind the truth forever. Behind every award, every red carpet, and every perfect smile, there can be darkness waiting to be exposed. Fame can make monsters untouchable for a while, but not forever. Because in the end, Hollywood doesn't forgive, it forgets.